Hi, I'm Gabrielle Hoyt, the literary manager of Roundhouse Theater. As part of Roundhouse at Your House digital programming, I'm hosting the weekly series Playwrights on Plays. Every Thursday at 7 p.m., I'll spend an hour interviewing a different Roundhouse-affiliated theater maker about their work, their career, and a play that has influenced and inspired them. We'll also include time in those interviews for your questions, which, if you're watching live, you can type into the chat window on the right of your screen. Each script we discuss is already free online for you to read so that you can continue to engage with theater from your home throughout the week. I'm thrilled to begin this series by interviewing one of my personal favorite playwrights, Martyna Majok. Martyna's collaboration with Roundhouse began in 2015 when we produced the world premiere of her play Ironbound, which went on to win the Helen Hayes Award for Best Play and to enjoy a celebrated run in New York. It's since been produced around the world, and since then, Martyna's also won a Pulitzer Prize for her play Cost of Living, which Roundhouse was scheduled to produce this month. While that production has been postponed, we'll be excited to welcome back the same cast to remount that play in 2021. Today, Martyna and I will be discussing one of her favorite plays, Conor McPherson's The Weir, before turning to questions from you. As a reminder, if you're watching live, you can type those questions into the chat window on your screen, and we'll be able to do so throughout this broadcast. And hi, Martyna.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm so nervous. I know that I'm only speaking to you, but there are other people beyond.
Yes.
Yeah, this is very scary. Hi.
Well, we can pretend it's just us.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm okay. I'm okay. How are you? That's a hard question, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm healthy and safe, and that's, my family's healthy and safe, and so grateful, and that's grateful for that, and that's good. I'm having a lot of the same feelings I think other artists are feeling right now. I miss the theater desperately. I just want to be back in a room with actors and collaborators, but I'm good. I'm good.
When I asked you if you wanted to do this interview series, you had a specific request for the audience. You said if we should encourage them to drink something. Do you want to share that?
Yeah. I highly recommend this. Take this time to go open up a bottle of something and settle in. Which hopefully you also open up a bottle of something while you were reading this beautiful play, The Weir. Highly recommend it. I'm drinking Ironbound hard cider, which I just feel like I just want to let you guys know I'm always on brand. What didn't you do with G&T?
Yes, indeed.
That's a good sound. I also don't know which line I should have cider. Like Conor McPherson, I'm going to go this direction.
Classy.
Yeah.
So I want to talk first of all, just for a few minutes about what you were doing before this all started. You were in rehearsals for your play Sanctuary City, which was going to make its world premiere at New York Theater Workshop. And I know that was a very hard production for you to say even a temporary goodbye to. Can you tell us a little bit about that play and what's happened with it since you ended rehearsals?
Yeah, for sure. Also, na zdrowie, everyone out there.
Nostrovia.
Nice to be chatting with you. Yeah, it was. It was a world premiere production of a play that's personal and close to me, and it was going really well. It was of course, a global pandemic had to happen for how well it was going in the room. Just had very lovely people to work with, and I was very proud of what we made together, and we were about halfway through previews when we had to stop the show, and we're still hoping that we can bring it back, but everything is so uncertain with we don't know when and where and all that stuff. But New York Theater Workshop still seems to want to do the show, and we very much are keen to bring it back too. So yeah, I was heartsick about it. Went through the mourning process of grief, but now I'm just hopeful that we can bring it back somehow.
The play and kind of the response afterwards was featured in a New York Times article, right?
Yeah, there was a couple, actually, Washington Post article. There were a few when we knew that we had to shut it down on that Thursday night. Then we worked really fast to get a camera crew in. So we could capture just mostly for archival purposes, just to have it. the production that we'd made. And so we decided to also maybe invite some press to kind of document, not to review it, but to sort of document this weird moment in history, in theater history, in all of our histories. So we had some press watching the run. We had a very small audience that we situated 6 feet apart from each other. Theater, to watch that run. And it's been nice to still kind of feel like the play is alive somewhere, out there, even though it didn't get to open. But yeah, Peter Marks came, or he's yes, from the Washington Post, was one of the folks that we had.
I feel similarly about your play Cost of Living, which we were doing rehearsing at Roundhouse, and then had to postpone. But
great.
The knowledge. Sorry?
The photos look beautiful. The ones that you just showed looked great.
Oh, it's no, I mean the knowledge that it's going to have a life, I think, has been really meaningful and helpful, because it's such a beautiful work as well. On the theme of being a playwright right now, I'm wondering what that looks like for you. Are there still projects that you're working on and that are in development? What is being a playwright during a pandemic mean for you?
It's actually not that dissimilar from, to be totally honest, it's like mining one's demons in isolation and then putting them into an arc that's legible for strangers. It's like sort of what I tend to keep doing in isolation. The thing that feels different, aside from like there's fewer happy hours, which is difficult, is that like my favorite part of the creating theater process is the rehearsal room. And so that's obviously something that can't be happening right now. I don't like writing. I find it very difficult. I sort of write so that I can understand certain things that I'm going through, and then I figure them out in writing, but I don't really know, I don't really gather up all my understanding about anything until basically opening night. And a large part, and I write to be in the rehearsal room, and so there's, we're sort of in limbo now of like when that will happen. And so I've been working on some television things right now. It's been hard to be creative because there's the like just surrounded by the news and all these thoughts, and the morning process is a real process, for something that like you didn't get to feel like you completed. But I'm working. I'm still get up and write.
I think for a lot of people, including artists, that kind of like simultaneously drive to be productive and to respond in some way, but then at the same time this sense of anxiety and being in limbo is really difficult.
I've appreciated the people who've talked about compassion during this time. Like, you don't have like when that can I curse? Okay, cool. When that fucking meme with the like, oh, like Shakespeare wrote King fucking Lear, I was like, I don't need that pressure. Like, do me something that fucking you wrote King Lear and therefore you should be like writing your like magnum opus right now. Like, it's fine if you're gonna go through the feelings you're going through, or at least like I'm trying to manifest that, because it's a real thing. So yeah.
Do you see yourself, maybe not now, but at some point in the future, responding to or writing about this moment? Do you feel like that's in the cards for you?
I think I tend to respond to things that I'm going through personally in some way, but I rarely am like, I'm writing a play about this thing. Like with Cost of Living, for example, I didn't realize that I was sort of a play about our need for other people and like loneliness and like a very particular brand of American loneliness and all that sort of stuff until later. It was just sort of the things that I was not even in conversation with, because I didn't even know I was talking to them with myself. So I think that I'm absorbing what's happening, and at some point it will find itself, this whatever this is, that will figure, that will find itself, we'll understand later, will find itself in a play without me sort of saying I'm writing a play about coronavirus or or isolation. But yeah, probably.
For those who are tuning in who maybe don't know as much about you, who haven't been lucky enough to see one of your productions, I'm curious how you would characterize your work, or how you would, if someone were to ask what kind of playwright is Martyna, how you would respond to that.
Oh fuck! Oh no! No. Maybe I'll say what I've discovered that other people say.
Go for it.
Pop out. But I when I write, I tend to pull from the people that I know and the worlds that I've lived in. And so I'm just writing my friends and family, or versions of myself, or what, for permutations and composites of people I know. And when I first presented these plays to other people, they would say, "Oh, you're writing about poverty. Oh, you're writing about immigration. You're writing about issues of class and women." And I was like, "I guess, yeah, but that's coming from the outside as opposed to something that I feel like I set out to do." But then you see yourself in comparison with the rest of the plays that are out there, and it is that's why I tend to write about characters who tend to be displaced or seen as less than sometimes, I think, in societally. I write from their perspective. I put them center stage. I write with humor because the characters have humor, because they find joy and beauty and things to laugh about in the world. I'm in love with character, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. Is that good? What would you?
It's great. I mean, it's also, we'll get to it, but it's part of why I'm so excited to discuss Conor McPherson with you, because he's also such a humane playwright who manages to talk about so many things while remaining so specific. I also do want to briefly discuss the Pulitzer in the room. I mean, I'm assuming in the apartment, somewhere in the apartment.
It's here. It's here. It's
in that the last time that I was lucky enough to work with you was 2015, when Roundhouse produced Ironbound, and that was also quite a significant production for you. You've talked about it afterwards in terms of what it meant for you and your mom. I'm wondering if you can speak to that briefly, and then we can discuss the wildness of your past 5 years.
Oh my God, that was the opening night at Roundhouse was one of the most meaningful moments in my career as a playwright, like full stop. And I only just started drinking, so like we can't get too emotional. But it was I'd written the play. The main character is based on my mother, and I've obviously changed some things around, but it's a lot of it's her story. And she's somebody who I think felt invisible for a lot of her life, and or people projected invisibility onto her. And at the opening night, there was 300 people in the audience. My mom was there. She was sitting next to me. Oh, and after the lights went down, the play ended. Everybody leapt to their feet and did a standing ovation. And I was like, oh, they see her, like they. So yeah, that was a good moment. But so thank you for that. Thank you for giving me that.
It was also I don't know if you remember, it was my first professional production.
That's crazy.
So it set the bar very high. Yeah. And then right after that, actually, Roundhouse produced The Night Alive by Conor McPherson, which is a lovely juxtaposition if you think about it. And since then, since 2015, you have casually won a Pulitzer, met Kendrick Lamar, all kinds of fun things. And so what I'm curious about is, has this kind of meteoric career trajectory changed the way you write, or the type of work that you feel you can write? Like, do you feel like now that you have attained a certain national prominence, you can pick plays that are harder to produce, or are you kind of doing the same thing you've always been doing?
I feel like I like living in this idea of the world that you I'm like, it doesn't feel like anything's changed to be. It's actually kind of, some of that is a nice thing. I think I like, of course, dreamed I dreamed about a Pulitzer. I'm supposed to. It's to me. I was like, that means that you're a writer and that like you're good and that you're enough and like and you finally like belong in some sort of way or something. And I was surprised to know that the feelings of insecurity don't go away.
No. But once you attain a certain level of success, they go away.
But that means the work continues. That means that you continue, that there's still, it also means that you still have more to, like, I was like, oh, I have more to say. I have more to, like, I'm going to continue living life. And this work hasn't, the work hasn't stopped, or the urgency to do the work hasn't stopped. And I want to make the big epic play. I want to do the, I want to try out different forms. And that was my second produced play. I mean, third if you count like a small production in Chicago that I wasn't a part of. So it was a total surprise, and it was a great surprise, a great day that day that I found that phone call. But I don't feel like it's changed much, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe some people. I think there's something interesting about like walking into a room though, and people might see you as less than for whatever reason, like being a woman, whatever, people might see you as less than. And somebody says, oh, she's a Pulitzer, and they maybe change the way that they perceive you, which is also sort of fucked up, but it's sort of a little thing that I remind myself I have when I feel bad.
You mentioned kind of like future dream projects or things you're excited to try that you haven't yet. And I'm wondering if you can tell me and our many thousands of digital friends, what are you excited to try next? What do you feel like is next for you in terms of form or subject matter?
Actually, yeah. I'm writing a musical about the evacuees of Chernobyl, and which is something I've wanted to do for about 10 years. I am connected to that event in my own little way, and I've wanted to write specifically a musical. I've never wanted to write any other musical except for this. So that's one thing that when I finish some of these TV projects, I'm going to go right into. I started writing it already.
Wow. Do you have a composer partner in that?
Yeah, I'm writing the play version of the musical first because there isn't a source material. It's interviews and conversations, and so it's not like I can hand a composer a book and say, well, I'm adapting this, or a movie and say I'm adapting this. Like, do you respond to it? So I'm going to create the story first, workshop it like a play, and then adapt it into a musical that I would be writing the lyrics for, because I'm just not sure how to do it any other way.
Why is that a subject matter that you feel merits a musical rather than a play?
I think I just wanted song. I wanted to it felt like what it warranted the emotion that incites song, that experience of sort of being displaced and having to restart your life. And it's a kind of polyphonic narrative right now with a lot of different voices, different people, different narratives and stories. And so I just want to bring. I also love that music from the area, and so yeah, I just wanted to have to sing.
I'm excited to see it, to hear it.
Me too, actually. Me too. Yeah, but that's and other plays too. I mean, I obviously Sanctuary City, and you asked like, has this stuff that I'm writing about changed? And it hasn't really. I'm still writing kind of about the people that I love and grew up with in one way or another, and so interested to find like other forms and what else. I'm also like, I feel like I have my like palms open to the universe, being like, if there's something else, like I'm open and we'll see. But yeah, I'm interested.
Thinking for a moment about you've got kind of a personal connection to Chernobyl in that story, and of course many of your works focus specifically on New York and Northern Jersey. Which it feels also like a ripe time to be talking about those specific geographical areas, given what they've gone through in the past month.
I'm sure it'll, yeah, I'm not gonna stop. For better or for worse, I'm sorry guys, I'm not gonna stop writing about Jersey.
No, please keep writing about Jersey.
Yeah, it's I love so many things about, that I feel at home here as well, and I love like the sound of the mouths and
no, you have to.
Love Pearson. It's the same. He loves his characters, and he loves and the beautiful language and poetry that, you know, is their speech.
If nothing else, you keep giving me work because I can just be like, I'm a Jersey expert.
Yeah.
I lived there for 22 years.
You're there now, yeah?
I am fully in New Jersey right now, yes. Hi.
We're so close.
So before we do switch over to Connor McPherson's The Weir, I do want to give you the opportunity to for the folks who are watching, how, if people feel so moved to help arts organizations or freelance artists like yourself, what do you think is the best way to do so right now?
I mean, there's a few organizations like Broadway Fights AIDS, which also has there's a COVID relief and the Actors Fund, if it's like a monetary, monetary actual like relief for the artists. I know that some people have started found fellowships and grants and things like that for, I mean, our work just stopped. A lot of our work just, not just in the theater, but in survival jobs. I mean, restaurants and bars and things like that, like that's also stopped. So, I mean, it's always like, how can we help you be safe? And usually that means like money first. So, yeah. I mean, for anybody who is able, I think there's a few organizations that are like specifically helping artists, and I'm worried for the theaters as well after this, but I know that you guys probably have initiatives as well. But
yeah, we're there also, and I actually see that we are posting the URLs that you have in the comment section.
So Siren, because I am in Manhattan, we do hear a lot of ambulances and sirens right now. Yeah.
So let's talk about the Weir. Yeah. So before we even get to Connor McPherson's The Weir, I want to discuss your response to when I sent you this email, and I said that we wanted to pick something that was a classic that people could access for free, and you said, I don't connect with a lot of classics.
I respect them. It's just like, it's hard for me.
Well, but I would love to hear more about that and about your preference for this more modern work. And the Weir, of course, was produced in London in the late 90s and then came to Broadway in, I believe, 1999. So actually a while ago, but why that immediate preference for something in the late 20th century?
I think it was even thinking about, you said a play that you love, and that was immediately what I thought of was something by Connor McPherson. You probably this one is the one I love of his the most. I mean, with classic stuff, I just I find it hard to read. Like it takes me a long time, and it's moving once I figure it out. But I don't know. It's not an avenue that really spoke to me as much as I fell in love with the theater with the theater when it was more contemporary work. Like the first thing I ever saw was Cabaret, and there's something that just kind of that I respond to. But I wish I was like a classicist, like I could do these adaptations of like all the Greeks and like all the classic stuff.
You should adapt them and set them all in northern Jersey. Really briefly, can you tell the story of your seeing Cabaret, because it's a great story?
I feel like I've like bored people. Whatever, I'll tell it anyway. I hadn't seen theater really. I was like my last year of high school, and I was working a couple part-time jobs, working at like as a hostess at an Italian restaurant in Jersey, a couple restaurants. And one of the things I would do is I would also hustle at a pool hall called Guys and Dolls in Belleville, which like, I don't know the reference, but like, of course it was Fated. And I won $45 one time playing pool, which was more than I'd ever made before. So I thought like, oh, I should use this money towards something I would use had I come about it. Like I should use it if I had come about it legally. And my mom was she was cleaning houses at the time. She still cleans houses. And she would bring home, when she would clean these houses, owners would leave like pamphlets and magazines and things out for recycling. And she would bring that home for me and my sister because that's free reading material. And so one day she brings home this pamphlet for something called Cabaret. And she didn't know what it was, and I don't know what it was, but John Stamos was in it. And so she was like, Uncle Jesse's in New York. Like, is this of interest? You know, it's like, fuck yeah. And tickets were $45, and that was apparently the Sam Mendes production that Alan Cumming had originated the MC, and John Stamos took over. So Uncle Jesse is the reason why I'm a playwright.
Thank you, Uncle Jesse, from all of us.
Uncle Jesse, thanks, John Stamos. One day, and I'll be like, hey.
So
text on me.
So let's turn to the Weir, and just as a quick reminder for those who maybe have joined us, feel free to ask Martyna questions in the chat bar window on your screen. So aspiring playwrights, theater fans, Martyna Majok super fans, Grandma, I know you're watching.
Yeah.
Whoever wants to, please feel free, and we'll get to those in the last 10-15 minutes of our discussion. But the Weir, so I certainly hope that after hearing you talk about it, every person watching will immediately download this play and read it, because it's absolutely gorgeous. But for those who haven't, I'm wondering if you can give a brief synopsis or summary of what the Weir is about.
Yeah, let's and fill in where I like miss stuff. We can do it collaboratively, like in the theater. Oh, I miss it so much. The Weir is set in a pub in rural Ireland. There's 5 characters, 4 men who this is their sort of this is their the watering hole where they go frequently. And one day, a stranger arrives in town. She's just moving to town. Her name's Valerie, and she joins the men, and they start talking. They start telling ghost stories to each other, and they arrive at a surprising place. And it's a beautiful play about connecting with people and loneliness, and where you live, I think, too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's a lot of drinking as well.
I was also excited to see that in the original Broadway production, and before that in the UK, that Michelle Fairley, who played Catelyn Stark on Game of Thrones, was the original Valerie. Who knew?
I don't know these things.
Me neither. Until you tell me.
The worst. Like we'll be in casting, and then like the most famous person will walk in, and I'll be like, "Hello, friend," and then I'm like, "I just don't know."
Hey, you look really familiar. I guess we're friends.
Like if like Tom Hanks like rolled in, I'd be like, "Oh, like Forrest Gump is here," but like I just don't. Don't know contemporary.
So to begin with the Weir, if one were to be looking at the Weir and then at some of your work, what are the immediate parallels you think someone could see?
I think we both love our characters. I think, and that's what I responded to. Like he has a deep love of his people. He like loves language too, and he not finds poetry. He knows that there is poetry in the way that people speak, and particularly the way that people that he grew up with speak, and he can like deploy it beautifully. And I also think that there's like the world might seem small. I mean, it's just a pub, like one night. It's a continuous action play. Like it lasts like 90 minutes and 90 minutes in real life. And it might seem small, but there's this like larger, sometimes even otherworldliness that exists and feels like it's in conversation with with many things without you feeling as though you're in a political play or you're in a supernatural play necessarily. Some of them are more so than others, but I think I especially really respond to that. There's a spirit, there's like a soul in. I mean, this is why I love him. This is why I try to write like him. I deeply love his plays, and I'm so inspired by them, and I try to comes close to that is what he does to me when I read his plays or see them.
When did you first encounter his work, or specifically the Weir?
I think it was the Weir. That was the first play, and it was in Chicago. I had graduated undergrad, and I stayed in Chicago, and I set out to be a playwright. I was like, I'm going to be a playwright. I have no idea how the fuck to do that, but I figured that I would like work part-time at a bar, and then the other part of the time was I would just go to the Chicago Public Library and take out and consume as many plays as I could. And so I'm pretty sure that I read it there at the like Harold Washington Public Library. And then later on I found this fantastic recording. I'm so happy that it exists, and you can just find it online, of the original production, because I think it's such it's a world that needs to be spoken. I mean, most plays, you need to hear them. You need to hear, like, it's such a, the magic exists like poetry in the air, and to hear it it's just so incredibly moving. Those actors are fantastic. And so then I'm not sure when I discovered that, but I listened to the recording maybe once a year.
So have you gotten to see it live or no?
I saw a small production. I think it was at Irish Rep a few years ago. I think, yeah, but that was the only one. I've watched some of his other plays at the library here at Lincoln Center, and then I saw the original production of Night Alive when it was done at the Atlantic, and that's where I met him. I was with Josiah, my husband, who was also in Ironbound, in a Roundhouse. We went during previews, and he knows how much I love him, and he was like, "Yo, turn around, there he is." Go. He's like, you should talk to him. I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, this was probably like 2014 or something. Like, but I was like, this is my chance. It's my one and only chance. So I went up to him, and he was so kind. He was doing notes, and like he stood up, and I was like, I babbled, said basically, like, I think I proposed to him. I was like, I love you, and he was just very kind, and yeah, it was also a beautiful production.
So I love learning that actually as you were starting to read a ton of plays, you were doing so because you wanted to be a playwright. And part of why we're doing this series is that we want to show folks all the various ways that they can still be engaging with theater even when the actual auditoriums and buildings are closed. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about just what it's like for you to read a play, because I think because theater is such a three-dimensional medium, people sometimes have a really hard time with it, understandably so. And so I'd love for you to even give some pointers or just some thoughts as to when you start reading a play, what that experience is like for you.
I think what was really what was exciting to me when I first started reading plays was finding like my people, like the way people speak to me is so personal and reveals so much about them. Maybe it's because I grew up with like a first English as a second language, and I was very attuned to different the ways people are making meaning with words that might not be their, like, what they feel most comfortable in. I found beauty and poetry in that. When I first started reading plays, I remember the first time I read a Stephen Allegirgus play, and I was like, oh, these are my people too. I felt so less alone because it was these things I hear, this mouth that I hear, this poetry that I hear that's like in my life, that was like somehow magically captured on a page, and that got me so excited to like find what my version of that was. It's so useful and encouraging when you see like some kind of representation of like where you feel like it's close to you, and it gives you hope that you can do that too and find your own version. So like part of that was like just the actual words and the way that people speak. And then I just found it fascinating how like you create an entire that's all you have is language. Like you move an entire story based on how people are engaging with one another. When I first started writing plays, I was trying to understand certain things that happened to me growing up or in my life, and I would often write, like I would go from an event in my life and then go backwards to sort of try to understand how like something that I might find paradoxical or extreme or like mysterious, some kind of human action and behavior, like how that could happen.
Yeah.
And I would go backwards and try to see what's the kind of the causal thing that like would end up in this. And also like when you are writing plays, you have to be everybody. You have to like occupy every consciousness. And so you can't like, nobody can be written off. Like nobody can be a villain and nobody can be, you know, just a victim or whatever. Like it's you get to you access all these characters with humility. And so like I think that was I didn't answer your question at all. I kind of went but I think that anybody can learn to be a playwright by reading and by seeing theater and then breaking down what those plays do, how they create feeling and understanding in you, and then just kind of like learning how you fit into that. So anybody can go in with the library card, can be a player.
We've talked about dialogue a lot, and I would love to actually dig into that, because I think one of the amazing things about you as a playwright and Conor McPherson are this kind of mastery both of dialogue and dialect as two slightly different but obviously intertwined things. And he, of course, does so for parts of Ireland, and you do so often, though not entirely, for New York and North Jersey. And I'm curious because, and you've talked a little bit about the poetry of that, but I'm curious how you feel that kind of dialogue can thread the needle between authenticity and poetry versus something that feels condescending or even cartoonish.
I think that we all have a dialect, right? Like you and I have a dialect, and then we also have an idiolect, which is like the particular way that we as ourselves speak. Like I ramble and I tell jokes for my insecurities and I interrupt myself. And those are all like, if you broke that down, is a characteristic of myself. And so I think when you talk about authenticity and writing certain voices from specific parts of the world, right? Like, I think as long as you marry those two things, like dialect is like the way a certain mouth has formed around language, like that's a regionalism, that's and idiolect is like who a person is. And so it's like as long as those two things exist, that you're always that there's nuance and there's a character that like forms out of those two, that fusion.
I learned a new word today.
Idiolect?
Yeah, that's
it should be an insult, right? But
no, it's great. Wow,
it's not dark in my apartment. I'm gonna turn the light on.
No, go for it. Go for it. I'm going to. Oh, hey, let there be light. I also, something else you mentioned about McPherson and that I definitely see in your plays as well is that infusion of magic into the mundane. This idea that we're talking about a very familiar earthbound setting, and yet at the same time, there's a sense of something more. And I'm curious for you, is that something that you intentionally infuse into your plays, or is it just something that comes naturally for you? Because it seems, I see it as a real parallel between you and McPherson, and also as a real hallmark of your work.
I've heard people say that for him it has to do with the background in Catholicism, which maybe I don't know. Like I also grew up Catholic. I don't know that I would like that I would, but I know that people say that about his plays, and it's kind of a commonality that we have. But like I think there's something to me that is like immensely hopeful about having that otherworldly relationship to something otherworldly. Like it's hopeful, and it's also like it's I was gonna say humble, but I'm not sure that that's the word. I think it's like you know that you're a part of you're a part of a thing, because there were people who came before you, people who came, that ghosts are people who came before you, right? And like dreams and lives lost, and like I want to desperately believe in ghosts. Like that desire to believe in ghosts like started me writing Cost of Living.
Mhm.
Like I lost a family member, and I just wanted to know that something remained, and I think it's a yearning that of life to be a certain way, and that we matter, and that we continue, and that people before us have mattered. And so maybe it's like I think I just want that to be the case with humanity and the world. And so it's in the plays, which I have somewhat control over. I'm the writer of them. But
Um,
yeah, I find the way he does it so beautiful, and sometimes like deeply scary. I mean, the end of Shining City is terrifying.
yeah, I mean, The Seafarer is also, which was on Broadway. It is quite a piece with a darkness that exists in the Weir as well, but The Seafarer, I think, has much less hope for humanity.
Oh, I think there's hope in there so much. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I want to pick up on you mentioned yearning in your depiction of Macpherson and the Weir, and something I love about classic amazing plays like the Weir is how they offer you something new every time that you revisit them. And in preparation for this conversation, and in rereading and re-listening to the Weir, it's people telling stories in a bar, and something that many of us speaking and listening to simply don't have access now.
Yes, I want it.
But I'm curious, in revisiting the Weir over and over, what struck you? Do you find new things every time? Did anything strike you as new or surprise you this time?
I forgot about Finbar being a harp. Because they had that joke the whole time, and like, like, so, small things. But there was something that you had me thinking about, the darkness of that you talked about, with the seafarer and darkness. I was just thinking, I was thinking about how those two things, like, they have to exist, and both of those things, like the dark and the, I mean, find it weird to say dark and light, but it's like, but like, sort of the things that we're more afraid of, and the things that are more difficult, and not levity, because levity feels like it's disregarding, but like, what feels like to me like a reaching out, a connection. It's like when I if I'm vulnerable in a moment, and then I feel like I've revealed something about myself that makes me maybe uncomfortable, I'll make a joke. Mm-hmm. And when I'm making a joke, it's me reaching out to you saying, is that okay? Am I okay? Like that. Yeah. If you laugh, like what you just said right now, like if you laugh, I'm like, oh, I was heard. Okay, great. We're still here. And they do that so much in the Weir, where they'll tell, I mean, it's at the end of all those, the ghost stories, they get to some of them get to some pretty difficult places, and there's my cat in the background. So
oh, I'm so glad. We needed at least one animal cameo.
Yeah, she's gonna come in. But they get to, at the end of them, it's almost like they've been in a trance while they've been telling the story. Yeah. They see that they're out of it, and the people are there, and they'll make a joke and brush it off or whatever, because it's, people call it a survival mechanism or a defense tool, whatever. But to me it's the opposite. I think it's somebody reaching out and saying, like, am I still okay? Are we still okay? Are you here? Am I, allowed? And they can only exist, I think, with those, to get like that other feeling, that feeling of the otherworldly, and like the light and the love can, I think, only exist if you've had those moments. I also feel like something that both you and Macpherson do, and that's so useful to us right now, is, I mean, joy and grief just live on two sides of it. They're two dimensions of the same die or something. I mean, they're so close together, and they can coexist so closely. And that feels to me actually very useful right now. Yeah. This is that and also like the yearning for magic, I think, is like something that's the sort of the beyond as well, like the which is what I think grief is like finding yourself. I mean, it was the first 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks of this experience, I think, is being like, what can I count on? Like, what is the ground under my feet? Like, what do I have? Like, what do I do in these sort of practical ways, but also wanting to like move past that in some way.
Yeah. I want to turn to people's questions, but before I do so, I just want to say I did not realize that Connor McPherson was 27 when this premiered on Broadway.
I know. Oh my gosh, it's unfair.
I am. I mean, I was going to ask you how you relate as a similarly young and incredibly successful artist, but okay.
He was younger. He was. I am. He's good. He's just good.
But it is interesting because I mean, I would really characterize the Weir as a play with an old soul. I mean, the youngest character is in his mid-30s.
I've heard him say that it's because like there's higher stakes. Like it's like these characters being older, like they have more to lose. And the stakes are higher for them. And I was like, yes, this feels right. Yeah. There's a little bit more life that you can count for when you're younger, obviously.
I'd love to turn to, we've got some great questions and I think we'll get more. So the first one is from Pete Miller. It appears at the bottom of our screen. Noah and McPherson both write characters with strong emotional resilience dealing with difficult practicalities as opposed to people swamped by their difficulties. Thoughts? Thank you, Pete.
Thanks, Pete Miller. I'm thinking about the little note I put in Cost of Living. I think it's also in Ironbound, where it's self-pity has no currency in these characters' worlds.
Yeah.
I think it's like for to dwell is to sink in all of it. I think that like the character of Eddie Torres, for example, like in the beginning of Cost of Living, like he starts with like a 12-minute monologue to the audience that is at a bar. And the beginning of it, though I write about his character, that he's somebody who understands that you're not entitled to listen to him, that like that's not a guarantee, and so he feels like he has to entertain you and give you something in order for him to be enough. And I think that you're always trying to, it's a method of survival, I guess, and making sure that you're not alone is you can't dwell because you don't necessarily have a guarantee that anyone's going to help you, or that there is a way out of your situation, so you got to make it work. And so maybe it comes from that. There's not going to be somebody there to coddle you and solve your problems. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It also feels to me like in both your work as well as McPherson's, I mean, there's just not, there's no wiggle room to be swamped. I mean, these characters simply don't have the space in their lives to give. I mean, that would mean, I think I was speaking to our amazing actor Craig Wallace, who's going to be playing Eddie now in 2021, about the character of Eddie Torres in your play Cost of Living. But it's also true, I think, in a lot of McPherson, which is that if he stops moving, he's gonna die. I mean, there's no option to be swamped, to stop, to rest. There's only motion forward.
Yeah.
And that feels true to me of both of your works. Let's do another question from Kira Rockwell. I love Cost of Living, but especially for its gorgeous structure. At what point in your writing process did you know how the characters' lives would intertwine?
Very, very late. There's some plays that feel like they're like born from the front of your brain, and they just like dotted line get translated onto the page, and they like Ironbound was that way, and Sanctuary City was that way, where it just felt like I was like, oh, this is such a nice feeling. I'm just gonna let it go. Whereas Cost of Living was something I say that like it was hidden in the back of my brain or part or whatever, and I had to go searching for it. The characters were separate. I had this monologue, and then I ended up having this short little playlet that had John and Jess then at some point later, a few months later, I'd written the first scene with Eddie and Ani, and I realized that I think that person who had given that monologue is actually that same man, which, oh no, that means that that's his wife and that's who's gonna die. Oh no! we find that out pretty early in the play. It's fine. And then I kept they were, we started in the present, went back into the past, and then there were these two sort of parallel stories. And I was like, well, I know how plays work, is they're gonna intersect at some point. And I tried these various ways that, like, I kept trying ways to link them until it felt true. It was just like a process of a number of times that I was trying to see like how they might connect. And it was, well, I won't say it because we're gonna do a production of it, and I hope
we will.
It'll be a surprise, but I had to find it. And I had to be honest with myself about who people are and what they need and who needs the most.
As long as we're before we get to our next question, as long as we're talking about the Weir too, I think one of the amazing things for me in reading that play was, it's essentially, or at least at first glance, it seems like 5 monologues by 4 characters that are kind of, very organically woven into a narrative. But in fact, I mean, it seems to me it's in fact brilliantly structured to kind of pull us into this nether world where magic, where ghosts are possible in a way that they weren't at the beginning of the play.
Yeah, they ramp. They're also competing with each other.
Yeah,
like they're trying to one up each other. They're like, oh, you got, in their various ways. They're like, well, I have a story, and then we all know who wins. But it's not because she's trying to compete with them that she wins. But yeah, it's like there's like, it's like so tightly structured, and these are like the hardest place to write. I feel like these like set the timer and go, we're only going to stay here in this space, and you have these people, and like and go without, like, I'm a structure nerd. I love plays that play with time and space, and sometimes like that feels like that gives me like license to be as messy within the scenes, because I know the structure is going to hold. Like Ironbound, I had a very specific structure in mind, and it could be as messy and full within the scenes as I wanted, because I knew the whole would hold. But these are hard. This is like respect what he's because there's so much craft, and it's seamless.
Yeah, that was I found myself, I'd be in the middle of one of the monologues, one of the stories, and I would think, how did we get here? And I page back, look at it, the build up, because it was never like, and now I have an old folk tale for you.
Yeah.
It was so seamless. Let's go to another question from Ed Zakreski, managing director of Roundhouse Theater. Definitely not a play. At the end of Cost of Living, we learn the disposition of 3 of the 4 characters. Do you have an idea of what happened to John? Does he ever realize what happened to Jess? We are in spoiler-rich territory here. Maybe you can answer in.
I have an answer. It might not be a cop-out, but it is kind of a cop-out. Is that I still plan to go back to the play and do some rewrites. Like, I don't, I'm because I think there's certain things that are unanswered that, like, maybe it's worth talking about, or say, or having be a little bit more clear. So, I'll let you find out. But yeah, I think I'm gonna go back to it.
That's so exciting. I didn't know that.
Maybe you'll get the old draft. I don't know. It's by 2021. I think I'll. You can choose.
All right, we've got a. Did you ever get to meet John Stamos post Cabernet of Cabaret? Yes. No.
Right. Yeah. Neither post Cabernet nor post Cabaret have I gotten to meet John Stamos. But like, if you're out there, my friend, thank you so much.
The thing you gotta do is you just have to write a play with a part that is perfect.
I know.
John Stamos.
Cabaret is perfect.
That's the answer. We have a personal question for you, Martyna, if you are comfortable answering about your connection to Chernobyl.
Yeah. When I was 2.5, I was living in Poland. My baby teeth turned black and disintegrated. And we don't know, we don't know whether that was whether that was directly, it happened after, and when I'd always had teeth problems and medical problems, also thyroid problems, and when the medical problems were like at the worst, I asked my mom, like, why is this happening to me? And she's like, oh well, this event. And so I sort of learned about it when I was 20. I went to Kiev a few months ago, and I like went with full like, listen, I know, like, I'm not, who the fuck knows if this is actually what ended up happening if it was actually Chernobyl that ended up causing my teeth to turn black and crumble and then grow back translucent and have thyroid problems. But I felt connected to, I'm near to that part of the world, and so I'm not gonna have the answer, I think, medically for whether it was that, but it was what started me being interested in the stories of the people.
It's interesting thinking about your musical in that you this as with so many of your plays is so personal, but this time it is also a massive historical event.
Yeah, and it's an event that doesn't, like, it's a diaspora. It's a story, like, the people were evacuated, and then they just, a lot of the communities they're dispersed and relocated, and so it's there isn't sort of one narrative to follow. One could choose a narrative to follow, but it's like saying, oh well, all of 9/11 is this one family story. Like, it's that family story versus like checking in with a number of different people. There's a book by Svetlana Alexievich, Voices from Chernobyl, that has been like a guide to me for a long time, and it's a collection of a lot of different people's experiences, like 10 years after the event.
It's a difficult book.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Yeah.
We've got another question from Roundhouse Theater. Both the Weir and Cost of Living deal with ghosts. You talked about how there is something more out there. What ghosts haunt the American psyche at this current moment? What haunts modern theater? Can the haunting be instructed? Disturbing? Both?
Oh, this is a smart person.
Wow. Roundhouse Theater.
Ooh, okay. What ghosts? I mean, like, what ghosts? Like, horrible colonialism and murder is, I would say, is like a major ghost, and wrongdoings against people that still haunts this country, for sure. I think I think the American dream haunts the American psyche, where I think it can be very damaging to say, well, if your life isn't perfect, it's your fault because you're in America, when there are so many ways that the country has rigged things against people, and it's not always egalitarian and equal. And I think if you believe, like, oh yes, the American, like, everyone can make it, like, but it's not working for you, I think it can be really damaging. And so I think a lot of like shame and loneliness comes out of that feeling, that like persists. That's a good question, Ron.
Yeah. Martine, we got one more question for you, and then we're going to call it a night. Is it easy to explain to the parts of your family that are not familiar with theater what you do?
I feel like at first they were like, oh, it's like, you're like making movies, right? I was like, kind of. Like, I used to say that, like, theater is like movies that you can't afford to make, and so like, you're doing with people alive. But yeah, most of my family, like, didn't go to theater and didn't, my mom started going, like, when I started writing plays, and now she's like a theater person. I mean, much of a theater person. Like, I'm a Tony nominator, and so, like, luckily it means I get to go see, when there was Broadway, I get to go see a lot and bring my mom, and like, it's just like the greatest to.
That's the best
about musicals.
Martyna, we are at time. So before I say goodbye to everyone on the stream, I first want to say goodbye and thank you so much to you, and take care out there.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. And thank you for having me, and health to everyone. Na zdrowie to everyone.
L'chaim.
L'chaim, na zdrowie.
Alrighty. Bye, Martyna.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.